The story kicks off in the middle of a terrifying storm as our main character, a guy named Chuck, is just sitting there, calmly using the bathroom on a plane. And then out of nowhere, the cabin pressure starts dropping, which blows the bathroom door wide open, and papers catch fire, triggering a dangerous explosion. The pilot rushes Chuck back to his seat because they have to make an emergency landing in the ocean. The pilot hands him a life raft and tells him to buckle up. The plane starts nosediving fast. At this point, the plane is about 3,000 meters above the ocean, and that's when Chuck realizes his girlfriend's pocket watch, the one she gave him, has slipped away. The pilot tells him to put on his life jacket, but it's on the other side. Because of that pocket watch, Chuck unbuckles his seatbelt and staggers over to pick it up. But just as he grabs the watch and tries to get to the jacket, the plane shifts angles and he can't even keep his balance. The pilot notices Chuck isn't in his seat, so he unbuckles his own safety belt. The violent jolts badly injure the pilot. The pilot manages to bring the plane down softly onto the ocean surface, but the rough landing fills the cabin with water. And ironically, the fact that Chuck's safety belt wasn't buckled, that's what saves his life. Then suddenly, the upper section of the plane explodes, and ocean water starts flooding in. But by some miracle, Chuck has an inflatable raft in his hands. The moment he opens it, though, the raft's attached tube gets tangled, stuck inside the sinking plane. The drowning aircraft starts dragging Chuck down along with the raft, but luck was on his side. The rope connecting the raft suddenly snaps, and just like that, the life raft yanks him out from the jaws of death and pulls him back up to the surface. Chuck finally makes it to the top of the water. He pushes every last ounce of his strength to climb onto the raft and holds onto the edge for dear life. But slowly he starts drifting toward one of the engines that's still running. He spots the danger behind him and immediately squeezes his eyes shut. Right then, the engine catches fire and the blast wave launches him back into the ocean. The entire plane goes down with a massive crash, slowly sinking into the deep. But the danger isn't over yet. Chuck not only has to fight through the raging storm winds, but also a series of enormous waves crashing one after another. He just holds on tight to the life raft rope. Time passes, nobody knows how long, and then suddenly the raft starts losing air. The sharp rocks had ripped right through it, which meant he had finally reached the shore. He gathers every last bit of strength he has left and drags the raft all the way to the beach. The next morning, when sunlight hits his face, he realizes he's alive, washed up on a tiny island. But even after surviving death itself, there's no relief, because he has no idea what dangerous threats this unknown place is hiding. He walks around picking up scattered debris from the plane and starts searching the island for other survivors, people like himself. But when he looks around in every direction, the only thing greeting him is a silence so deep, it feels like it'll never end. It was painfully clear. He was stranded on an island that didn't even exist on the map. He calls out. To make sure he doesn't die trapped here, he starts coming up with ways to save himself. But at this moment, the only real option he has is to write "help" in the sand on the beach. As night falls, he's still hoping that some passing boat might spot him. But as the night gets darker, his hope slowly turns into fear because of the total silence surrounding him. He keeps trembling with fear as he hears the sounds of dangerous creatures in the jungle. The next day, he throws together a makeshift space using the stuff he collected and starts going through the cargo that came off the plane. Now, the only thing of any use to him is the pocket watch his girlfriend gave him. Thinking about the moments they shared together, his regret about being on that plane only gets deeper. See, just before Kelly left for a business trip, she had given Chuck that pocket watch so that when he returned on Christmas, the two of them could finally get married. But a sudden plane crash put that wedding on hold permanently. While all of his family members had already accepted that Chuck was gone, he was out there, fighting to stay alive. But finding food and water on this deserted island had become a massive problem, and nobody knew how long Chuck could hold on. He collects a bunch of packages from his company, but decides not to open them, because for him, that was a matter of professional honesty. Even stranded on an unknown island, he still doesn't want to break the trust of his customers. The help signs he'd scratched into the sand the day before, the ocean waves had already wiped them clean. He has to write them all over again using some old wooden sticks. Slowly, the will to survive starts growing stronger inside Chuck. He knows if he wants to get off this island, he has to stay alive no matter what. But on this barren little island, the only food he can find is coconuts. And since he has no tool to crack them open, even that becomes an insanely difficult task. He finally smashes one open using a sharp rock and starts drinking the water inside, which in that moment tastes like nectar from heaven. But coconuts alone aren't enough to satisfy him. Chuck decides to to explore the other parts of the island in search of more food. He wants to climb the highest peak and see everything from up there, but the sharp, rocky paths make it brutally difficult. So he cuts fabric from his pants, stuffs some padding in, and fashions a crude pair of shoes for himself. But when he finally reaches the top of the peak, he realizes this is truly a deserted island. Ocean stretches out in every direction, as far as the eye can see, and there's not a single other human being in sight. While he's standing there in despair, wondering how he's going to survive this, something strange in the distance suddenly catches his eye. Without a second thought, he sprints toward it. He thought it might be a pilot who survived just like him, but when Chuck turns the figure over, he finds that the pilot had died a long time ago. With a heavy heart, he drags the pilot's body back to the island and starts picking through it for anything useful. He keeps a pair of shoes that are still wearable, a flashlight that still works, and a worn-out wallet. Then he digs a grave for the pilot, buries the body, and carves the date of death onto a nearby rock. Later that evening, Chuck sits on the beach quietly gazing at his shoes. There's a strange sadness sitting heavy on him. He feels like maybe next time someone's lying in a grave, it'll be him. That thought keeps him up all night. He realizes if he just sits around doing nothing, death is guaranteed. So the very next day, he starts learning the art of survival in the jungle. He collects dew from leaves and stores it in a coconut shell because he needs clean water to drink. He sharpens a wooden stick into a spear to try to catch fish. Sure, it all sounds clumsy and ridiculous, but the constant effort keeps him from falling apart. That same night, while using the bathroom, he spots a light in the distance. He yells as loud as he can, trying to get that boat's attention. He feels like maybe he won't have to stay here anymore. He uses the flashlight to signal, hoping someone will see him, but the distance is just too great, and the tiny little light does absolutely nothing. As that distant glow slowly fades from his view, his heart fills with rage and helplessness. So first thing, the next morning at sunrise, he grabs the torn raft and heads in the direction of the ship, because after countless failed attempts, this was the one and only chance of escape he had, and there was absolutely no way he was going to let it slip away. Even though he desperately wants to cross the ocean, the waves keep beating him back over and over again. He tries more times than he can count. Each time the ocean pushes him right back, but still, he refuses to give up. He tries with everything he's got, but in the end, the waves swallow him whole. As soon as he goes under, his thigh slams into a sharp underwater rock, and a stabbing pain leaves his leg drenched in blood. At that point, he has nothing left in the tank. He drags himself and the shredded raft back to the shore in terrible shape. That evening, out of nowhere, a powerful windstorm and heavy rain tears through the sky, making an already wounded Chuck's situation even worse. He uses the raft to barely cover the company packages. Then he drags his bleeding leg around, looking for better shelter. He finds a small cave and drinks a few gulps of dirty rainwater just to stay conscious. Almost completely exhausted, his battered body can't take it anymore, and he collapses unconscious on the ground. The flashlight behind him drains its battery and fades into the dark. The next day, Chuck wakes up in sharp pain again. His leg wound is showing signs of infection. Out in the middle of nowhere with no treatment, this could spiral into something far more dangerous. To have even the slightest shot at staying alive, he has to push his feelings aside, and he finally decides to open the packages. Inside, he finds a dozen videotapes, a volleyball decorated like a gift, a beautiful woman's long dress, and the most stylish-looking pair of skates he's ever seen. The very last package, though, he decides not to open. Maybe because he doesn't want to be disappointed, or maybe because he wants to save at least one thing to look forward to. He uses the foam padding from the packaging on his wound. Then he pulls out the shoelaces and wraps them around his injury as a makeshift bandage. The blades from the skates become his most valuable tools, and from the mesh netting of the long dress, he fashions a simple fishing net. With his new fishing setup, for the first time in days, he finally gets to eat a proper, full meal. To make sure he can cook the fish and avoid getting sick, Chuck decides to try making fire by rubbing sticks together. But even after grinding away from morning to evening, and then from evening to the next morning, the small spark he manages is nowhere near enough to become an actual flame. By the time both his hands are rubbed raw and bleeding, Chuck completely loses it. The brutal life on the island and all those old wounds had broken him down entirely. He sits on the shore, cleaning his wounds in the water, and the sharp pain reminds him all over again just how bad things are. Now staying alive is a question he cannot run from. The volleyball he'd just angrily thrown sits near his feet. On it, his fresh, bloody handprint glows bright and vivid. And right then, a strange idea pops into his head. Using his saliva, he draws 2 eyes on the handprint and a little crooked smile above it. Now the volleyball looks just like a human face. Maybe it's because he's been desperately alone for so long, but he decides this face will be his companion. He names the volleyball Wilson and keeps it close to him, so that it can be by his side through this whole nightmare. Weird, absolutely, but at least it keeps him from feeling completely alone. With Wilson watching over him, it's like Chuck finds his energy again. As he starts grinding the sticks faster and faster, actual sparks finally fly between the pieces of wood. Watching real fire burst to life, Chuck is absolutely overjoyed, like he just won the biggest battle of his life. That fire becomes both his cooking method and a signal to let the world know he's out there. At night, he eats and talks to Wilson about his situation. By his calculations, he's now drifted well over 4,000 miles from where he started, which means the chances of anyone finding him are practically zero. But Chuck has no choice. He just keeps hardening himself and fighting to survive. Eating raw food and living in filth causes his teeth to swell up badly and get infected. Finally, unable to bear the unbearable pain any longer, he makes up his mind. He's going to pull the tooth out himself. He braces the ice skate blade against the tooth with one hand and grabs a rock with the other. He figures, better one sharp burst of pain than this endless agony. Then he brings it down hard. Even after becoming a straight-up survival expert in the jungle, the light in his eyes just isn't there anymore. 4 years in, Chuck has turned into a wild man. Sure, he's gotten good enough at fishing that meat isn't really a problem, but the will to keep living, the hope to escape, that had completely vanished from his eyes. He no longer holds on to any hope of rescue. Every day of survival is just another day of loneliness. But then one day, he finds a piece of tin at the edge of some rocks and brings it down to the beach. Just as the ocean breeze knocks it over, an idea suddenly hits him. If he could use this as a sail to cut through the waves, maybe, just maybe, he actually has a shot at getting off this island. The moment that thought lands, he doesn't wait another second. He needs to get off this deserted island as fast as humanly possible. Chuck immediately springs into action. First things first, he needs to build a boat. He gathers a massive pile of branches and lays them all together. He uses jungle vines to tie everything up and even repurposes the useless videotapes as rope. Now Chuck's mental state is starting to crack. He starts feeling like Wilson is watching him and doesn't want to let him go. That very night, he gets into a full-blown argument with Wilson. He says to Wilson, "I can't spend the rest of my life talking to you. Listen up, you $2 volleyball." Then in a fit of rage, he kicks his 4-year companion far away. But when he calms down a little while later, deep regret washes over him for what he did to his friend Wilson. So he heads out into the darkness of the night to find Wilson and carefully repaints the face back on him. Day by day, it goes on like this, and eventually Chuck's wooden raft is fully built. He has everything packed and ready to go. Now all he needs is the wind blowing in the right direction so he can push the raft out into the ocean. He even leaves behind a sign marking that he was stranded here. He has carved a record on this brutal island of over 1,500 days. When he's scratching in the very last mark, suddenly the wind starts blowing exactly in the direction Chuck had been hoping for. Bursting with excitement, he shoves the raft toward the ocean and sets out to find life, with his old companion Wilson by his side. The waves are just as powerful as ever, but they can't stop him from going home. Like battling the tides, every single wave nearly drags him under, but he keeps slicing through each one with sheer determination. Every time he escapes the jaws of death, the joy of getting out grows stronger inside him. When Chuck looks back at that tiny island that held him prisoner for 4 years, in that moment, something strange and bittersweet stirs inside him. If he hadn't had the will to face all that hardship, maybe he'd still be out there living a life full of nothing but loneliness. But his battle is just getting started. He has no idea that the dangers waiting ahead of him are going to be the deadliest challenge of all. Right at the moment when he thinks he'll just drift his way to civilization, another violent storm tears through and rocks him to his core. That night in the pouring rain, opening your eyes feels impossible. He just holds onto the raft, helpless in the middle of the waves, taking hit after hit. This is his hardest night yet. He's powerless and has surrendered everything to whatever fate has in store. The saving grace is that Chuck is one lucky man. Even that brutal overnight storm couldn't take him. But his raft takes heavy damage, and most critically, his old companion Wilson, with the rope loosened, has separated from the raft. By the time he realizes it, Wilson has already drifted far away on the ocean waves. Wilson was his one and only companion, the one he could pour his heart out to. Sure, he's just a volleyball, but he was Chuck's only lifeline. Chuck forgets everything and dives into the ocean trying to save him. But the distance is too great, and the deep, dark ocean keeps scaring him back. On one side is the raft that keeps him alive. On the other side is Wilson, his 4-year companion. But there's nothing he can do. He can only watch as his oldest friend drifts further and further away. And just like that, he loses his one and only friend. Loneliness and helplessness close in around him completely once again. Staring at the nearly destroyed wooden raft and gazing out at the ocean stretching in all directions, Chuck understands in the most gut-wrenching way possible that he will never make it home. And with that, the tiny flame of will to live that had just reignited inside him shatters completely. He finally throws away the raft's mast and decides he'll just quietly wait for the ocean to swallow him whole. Right at that moment, when Chuck has braced himself to face death, a sound rings out that he has only ever heard in his dreams. With all hope gone, he pulls together his very last ounce of strength, turns around, and sees a massive cargo ship floating right in front of him. The people aboard spot Chuck too, and just like that, after years and years of brutal hardship, Chuck finally boards a plane again and comes back home. His story of surviving and making it back in one piece makes him famous all across the city, but Chuck couldn't care less about any of that. He just wants to see his girlfriend, the one he hasn't seen in 4 years. But when he knocks on her door, instead of her, a man opens it, and Chuck is completely caught off guard. The man says, "I'm Kelly's husband." That hits hard, and right there, Chuck learns that the woman he held on to in his heart all this time is now married and has become someone else's child's mother. Kelly's husband tries to calm Chuck down while defending his wife. "Maybe you should have given her a little more time." And with that, he walks away. Seeing Kelly in tears, Chuck finally understands her situation. He realizes it's not her fault. Chuck probably would have done the same thing. That night, the company throws a welcome dinner featuring all kinds of seafood, giant crabs, and beautiful fish laid out across the table. Looking at all of it, Chuck feels something strange wash over him. His mind flashes back to the island, because the same crabs and fish that were boring survival food out there have now become a gourmet meal. The next day, Chuck delivers the one package he never opened on the island and leaves a heartfelt thank you note with it. He expresses that this very package is what kept him alive out there. What was inside that mysterious package that stayed with him for so long? We'll never know, because he never opened it. And just like that, this incredible story comes to an end. So now you tell me, how did you like this video? If you enjoyed it, go check out more videos on the channel and drop a comment below. Like and subscribe for more insane movies, letting me know which movie you want explained next.